But yes, my name is Michael Sauer. I'm a certified financial planner from Source Wealth. Today we're going to be talking about all things financial literacy, but specifically tailored to people in the medical profession. So a little bit of a general advice disclaimer to start with. So everything we talk about is general in nature. To receive personalised advice, that's fine. That's my day job. That's what I do. But then we need to, obviously sit down, work out what your goals, objectives, and financial circumstances are, and then we provide that advice. So today's agenda, we want to talk about understanding your personal cash flow, because that's the most important pillar of financial planning. So being able to save money each month and direct that into all sorts of things like investing, maybe putting more money into your super, paying off debts quicker, all those good things. As your career grows, your income will also grow. So being able to have tax-effective strategies is really important to medical professionals, and we'll run through that. We'll talk about the basics of investing. As medical professionals as well, you often have really large HECS and HELP debts, unfortunately. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of that. Then we'll talk about your life insurances and income protection. So everyone that's working and has dependents and has mortgages needs life insurances and income protection. But as medical professionals, you have that extra element of actually being on the other side. Now, we're also going to talk about buying a home, your own home to live in, versus rent vesting. And being medical professionals, this is very important as well, because often you're getting posted in different areas. So you're going rural, then you're going back to Melbourne, back to another city, rural again. Then lastly, we'll talk about the First Home Super Saver scheme, which is a scheme where you can put money into your superannuation, which you can later take out to use for your house deposit. All right, so this slide is quite busy, but don't be scared, because you will have access to your own cash flow template. So we'll send that out to you. You'll be able to scan a QR code later. Now, why is cash flow so important? Well, you need to be able to save money to basically build wealth. So if you're earning $200,000 but you save none of it, you're no wealthier than someone who's earning $100,000 but it's actually saving 10% of their salary. So it's really important you understand your income and your expenditure so that you can appropriately save, and it's not just left to chance. So this Excel sheet takes steps towards that. You can see there, basically you just put in your income levels, then your different expense line items, and what it does is it automatically categorizes it into what type of expense it is. So some expenses we can't avoid. There's your rent, your mortgage, your fixed bills, but then there's other expenses where we've got a lot of control over it. So things like discretionary expenditure, holidays, etc., etc. Now what we want to find with this exercise is what's your surplus each month? So how much can you actually save? Then what we want to look and see is, have you actually been doing that? So just because you say, you've got this level of expenditure and this level of savings, has that actually been the case? And so a lot of the banking apps have good tools these days which show you how much you're saving and spending, and they categorize it into these categories. But an easy way to do it as well is to look and see, what was your bank balance 6 months ago? What is it today? And work out, have you been meeting this monthly surplus cash flow? And if not, then you can investigate and go, where are the areas where I'm overspending? Or can I spend more? Now, once you have that surplus cash flow, that's where your financial planning gets really good, because then you can start diverting the surplus into things that compound your wealth. So paying off your debts quicker, putting money into super, investing, all sorts of good things. So it's not just what you're saving per month, it's the compounding effect of that as well. So let's talk about tax-effective strategies as your income grows. First one there, most of you will already know. It's the ability to salary package when you're working in hospitals. So you get this benefit that no one else does, essentially, in the economy. So it's about $11,000 of tax-free income, which is partly made up of your meals, but then also the rest of your salary packaging, which people put towards mortgage and rent and things like that. So that's a great start. On the salary packaging, if you don't know about that, ask your fellow colleagues. It's usually done through salary packaging providers like Maxia. They're often in the hospitals, or ask your HR. Then you can also do novated leases of vehicles. Now, particularly if you do need a new car and you wanted it to be an electric vehicle, then you can get a full fringe benefits tax exemption on EV vehicles, which is really good. So that's coming out pre-tax. So both of these are pre-tax. So you can see how you're getting your income lower and lower before you even start to pay tax. So that can often save several thousands of dollars per year in a net benefit. But the important part is you need to actually need a new car as well. Otherwise, you're just spending more money than you otherwise would have. And again, that's done through salary packaging firms like Maxia as well. The next one, so contributing into superannuation can be really tax effective. So you can save up to 32% in the dollar. So on $10,000, you could save $3,200 net as an example. And the 32% is worked out by the top marginal tax rate, which is 47%, less the superannuation tax rate of 15%, gives you that 32% saving. Now, putting money into super, it's great tax-wise, but in most cases, you can't touch the money until you're 60 years old. So it is tucked away for a little bit. The one main exception there, though, is if you're using it to buy your first house, which is the First Home Super Saver scheme, which we'll talk to in a little bit. So everyone in this room should have income protection now that we're working. Income protection is an insurance where if you get sick or injured, it pays you a monthly benefit, usually 70% of your income for as long as you need off work. Now, the advantage of paying for your income protection personally is it's deductible at your marginal tax rate, which could be as high as 47%. By contrast, if you have the income protection in superannuation, it's only tax deductible at 15% inside the super fund. So it makes it a lot cheaper paying for it personally. The added benefit as well is you can get a lot better insurance personally and through external super funds than typically most super funds. And particularly picking on HESTA and Aware Super, which many of you are probably with. So HESTA's default income protection only provides $1,000 per month with a 5-year benefit period. So think about how low that is relative to what your wages are now, and then think about you in 5 years, how much you'll be earning. You're going to need a lot higher income protection. And fortunately, there are income protection and insurance providers that really focus primarily on doctors and other professionals. So the rates are a lot cheaper and the cover's a lot better as well. Negative gearing, you would have heard this term a lot post the budget. Essentially what that means is that the costs on an investment are more than the income you're getting. So that sounds like a bad deal, right? However, you can use that to reduce your taxable income. It's a strategy that has only ever worked when the asset that you purchase has really good capital growth. Okay, so commonly people have done that with investment properties. You can still do it with property. Well, firstly, it's grandfathered if you already own an existing investment property, so that's good. But going forward, it's just going to be for new builds. Now, the problem with new builds is often they don't have the great capital growth that we're after. So think about, say, off-the-plan apartments and things like that. You're just buying the dwelling, you're not buying the land, and the land is actually what appreciates. So new builds, a little bit fraught with danger, a lot of them. You could do something called debt recycling. So debt recycling is where you already own a home, so you've already got a loan, and you use the equity that you've built up in that to take an extra loan with your provider. Now, most banks will only let you take maybe 100 or 200,000, so they won't let you take as much as they would have if you were buying an investment property, because it's not secured against property. But they might let you take 100,000 or 200,000 and use that loan to buy shares or ETFs or managed funds, which you'll see when we get to the investing slide, usually provides an arbitrage because the cost of debt, say your home loan might be 6%, but the rate of return you can get on those type of investments over the long term can be as high as 8, 9, 10%. So you're kind of making that spread. And lastly, a quick and easy one, once your income gets to a certain point, it actually becomes cheaper to have basic private health insurance than to pay the Medicare levy surcharge. So you get free private health insurance for most of you. If you're not at that income level, you will be soon. And plus, it's just a good idea to have private health insurance, which I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, right? All right, so the basics of investing. So this graph here, it's quite busy, but it shows what the rates of return have been on different asset classes over the last 30 years from 1995 to 2025. So you can see here, the highest performing asset class has been US shares at 10.8% per year on average. That's an average, you don't get that every year. It does fluctuate, but on average, that's what it is. So you might say, awesome, Michael, put everything in US shares, right? That's a fair assumption. Now, the reason why advisors always want a bit of diversification, even if you are a high growth investor, is if we look at the global financial crisis in 08 and 09, US shares, the aqua line, is all the way down here. It's even underperformed having your money in cash for 15 years, which is pretty crazy, right? It's since been on quite a good bull run. So with investing, the biggest determinant of how you should invest is your investment time frame. If you've got a really long time frame, so let's think about your superannuation, we want as much as possible in all these shares and property managed funds. Why? They're the best long-term performance. And we don't really care if we get these dips in that next 30 years like this, because you're making contributions every time these dips happen. So you're actually buying in at lower prices each time. And you can't even access the money even if you tried. So it's good to be high growth. But what happens if you've got a shorter time frame? So let's say, you were nearing retirement, or you were looking to buy a house in the next sort of 3 years or so. Well, we don't necessarily want everything in these shares. We want some of it in there, but not everything, because if we have another global financial crisis, you can see in some of these cases, it takes many years for it to bounce back to where it was. So the shorter your time frame, the more you should have in things like bonds and cash, as well as a little bit of shares to outpace inflation as well. Okay. So think about what your income level is, and then have a look at this table and see where you are on your HECS and HELP repayment rates. So you can see there, once you start earning over 186,000, you've got to pay 10% back of your HECS, or of your salary, sorry, in your HECS. So that is a massive percentage, isn't it? Because if you add that to what your marginal tax rate is, which is already 47% on those dollars above 190,000, you can see you're losing a lot in those two different things. So once you actually finish paying off your HECS, you immediately feel a fair bit richer just by that dropping off. But does that mean you should rush to pay off your HECS? Well, actually not really, because it's the one good type of debt, because it's the one type of debt that's only charged at inflation. Now, from that graph before, you would have seen that inflation's only 2.7% per year. So I could actually go to ANZ and get a term deposit at 5% or 4.5, whatever it is, and outpace that, right? So it's a good type of debt, and when we do have really high high inflation periods, and everyone complained to the government, hey, you can't charge us 7% on our HECS, they were like, yep, fair enough, and they actually reimbursed a whole chunk of it. So it's probably the best debt that you can possibly have. So in most cases, just let it pay off naturally, even though it'll be so annoying seeing that HECS and HELP thing on your payslip for years and years and years. However, sometimes it can be good to pay it off as a lump sum when you need more mortgage serviceability, which Aussie Home Loans and ANZ will attest to. It can help you get a higher borrowing amount. So that's probably the only time it is worthwhile doing. All right, so when you have dependents, when you have a mortgage, and when you're working, any of those three, which is probably at least one of those criteria for everyone here, that is working, you need your insurances in place. So there's 4 types of life insurances. There's your life/death insurance, which is easy to understand. You pass away, a lump sum goes to your dependents to pay off the mortgage and your lost income component. The total and permanent disability insurance is the interesting one for doctors specifically, because when an insurer wants to know whether they should pay this claim, they'll be asking 2 doctors to sign off that a person is either unlikely or unable, depending on what policy definition it is, and essentially how much you pay for the policy, to work in any or their own occupation for which they are reasonably suited, trained, or have experience in. So the classic example here of why it's really important to have own occupation insurance is, think about if you're a surgeon. You're going to want own occupation because if something happens to your hands, you want to be paid out on TPD. You don't want the insurer to say, you know what, we understand you can't be a surgeon anymore, but you're medically trained so you can do any other occupation in that sphere. Now, you might have been on a surgeon on an amazing income, and all of a sudden you've dropped your income by 4 times or something. Well, guess what? You've got 3 kids in private school and you're pretty stuffed. So what we do for our clients is firstly calculate how much insurance they need, then pick the best provider for them, and we're pretty much always going to want own occupation TPD. The problem, in your standard super fund, it's always any occupation. So it's a cheap and not good version of TPD, unfortunately. So there are much better providers out there that we can set up for you. Trauma insurance, that covers 40 of the worst illnesses, so think heart attack, cancer, stroke. Yep, question?
We're all of us in the room are junior doctors at the moment.
Yep.
How does own occupation translate into that? If you give an example of someone who's a specialist,
yep.
No, we're all non-specialists.
Yep.
How does that?
Yeah, well, I would get own occupation even in your example, like when you're just starting out. So it doesn't have to be, the surgeon one is the classic one they give in the kind of insurance playbook because it's so, the difference between incomes and specialties is so extreme. But even for me, I wouldn't want to do any occupation. If I can't do my own one, I don't want the insurer to decide whether it's payable because, for instance, I worked at Woolworths, 15, 20 years ago, whatever it was. I want them to pay it out when I can no longer do my work.
Is it something that you have to go in and change along the way? Like, let's say some of us end up becoming surgeons theoretically. Would you then have to update what your own work would be, or it updates as your...
No, you have to take out an own occupation TPD policy.
So you have to do it again. As in, so like, let's say right now we did own occupation and then in 5 years I became a surgeon. Would I have to update my insurance policy?
Yeah. Well, no. So not in that case. So it depends because when you take out your own insurance, you get individually priced based on your occupation. So it may be, and the good thing is being any sort of doctor, straight out of the gates, it's going to be cheaper than 90% of or 95% of occupations, right? Because of the income levels, the security of the work, etc. Say by contrast, if you were a builder and you're on the tools and you're walking on roofs and you're playing with power tools and all sorts of fun things, the premiums are going to be double the price of any doctor, no matter level or specialty, straight away. So, basically good. And the good part about actually getting your insurance when you are young is because you haven't, in most cases, haven't had enough years to get battle scars and get illnesses and things that pop up, and it does pop up, a lot through, your later life. So you can lock in good rates early, because, if you apply in your 40s and 50s, often you would have had more things, and that's where you sometimes get loadings or exclusions applied. Okay. They all work in tandem as well. So let's say you had cancer. Firstly, you would get your trauma insurance. You might get a couple $100,000 payout so you can get the best treatment, best recovery. Then you would also get income protection paid, so 70% of your monthly salary for as long as you needed. We always want to apply for benefit periods to age 65, not 5 years or 2 years like is standard in a lot of the super funds. So it's not necessarily their fault, the super funds. They don't know anything about you. They don't know that you're a doctor. They don't know how many kids you've got. So they just give everyone who's the same age the same, basic, crappy and cheap level of cover. But for most of us, that's not enough. And so you've got to get it sorted yourself. Buying a home versus rent vesting. So as I mentioned, rent vesting used to be a popular strategy with doctors because of how much they were bouncing around. They wanted to get into the property market, but didn't know where they were going to live. Now it's a little bit less attractive now that they've got rid of negative gearing. That's a really disappointing kind of unintended consequence. Buying your own home has always given you the capital gains tax exemption on property. So if you later sell it, you pay no capital gains tax, which has been a good part of there. Borrowing capacity is usually bigger buying your own primary residence, and therefore the capital growth potential is usually bigger because you're more likely to buy, say, a house on land, which appreciates, than if you were to buy, say, an apartment rent vesting, and you're not going to get that same capital growth in a lot of times. Now, sometimes you can rent vest and you might buy in another area, or you might use a buyer's advocate or something like that, who in your price point can still get you a property with good capital growth. It's just very hard in Melbourne. At that kind of first home buyer investor level, it's harder to get good properties that have good capital growth. Lastly, buying your own home is good because you get the first home super saver scheme. This allows you to put money into your superannuation that you later take out for your home deposit. You must not have owned a property before. You can contribute $15,000 per year up to a total cap of $50,000. So essentially it's 3 and a bit financial years to fully maximise it. So money goes into the super fund at 15% instead of your marginal tax rate. And it must be for your primary residence, so live in it for at least 6 months in the first year. Now, when I've done the modelling for this, based on a $150,000 salary, and if you maximised it fully across the 4 financial years, you would save $11,000 compared to the alternative of saving just in your personal name. So it really does help build that deposit. For most people, you're still going to need more than the 50,000 plus interest that it's earned, because you're going to need a higher deposit. So you're going to need to do this plus build your own personal savings, in things like cash, so ANZ's term deposits and high interest cash accounts. Plus you might have also a share portfolio or managed fund ETFs on the side that are also working. But just remembering with that investing slide that we talked about, probably not having too much in shares, and therefore you've got more time frame risk. Okay. So lastly, feel free to get your phones out and scan this QR code. You'll get access to this free cash flow guide. And this is really useful because you can start working out how much can I possibly save? And therefore, once I know that, am I sticking to it? And therefore, what should I start doing with it? And that's where, the advice around, do I pay off debt? Do I put it into the mortgage? Do I put it into super, etc., becomes really applicable.